Welcome to Harris Academics. This is Endocrine System Part 1, and this video will cover a brief overview of hormones, their receptors, and the differences between the endocrine system and the nervous system. Now let's get started. What is a hormone? Well, a hormone is a signaling molecule transported by the blood or by the fluids surrounding tissue. So a hormone is not secreted by a neuron. Let me clarify something about this that has confused students. This is going to be our signaling molecule, dopamine. When this kidney cell releases dopamine to stimulate its neighboring cells, the dopamine is acting as a hormone. When an impulse travels down a neuron, neurotransmitters are released at the synapse. The dopamine released here is acting as a neurotransmitter. So is dopamine a hormone or neurotransmitter? Well, it can be either. Just remember, this dopamine is a hormone traveling through blood and tissue, versus this dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter traveling out of a neuron at the synapse. A water-soluble hormone, like TSH, is able to freely move through blood and plasma because these are water-based solutions. However, water-soluble hormones are unable to penetrate the nonpolar region of a cell's membrane. Because of this, receptors for water-soluble hormones are membrane-bound. These receptors bridge through the nonpolar tails of a cell's membrane. To contrast, a lipid-soluble hormone cannot travel through the bloodstream without a carrier. These steroid hormones bind to globulin carrier molecules until reaching their target cell. At this point, lipid-soluble hormones are able to pass directly through a cell's lipid bilayer, aka the cell membrane. Now, because lipid-soluble hormones are able to pass directly into a cell, the receptors for lipid-soluble hormones are located inside of the cell. In addition to having different locations on a cell, receptors can also vary in number. This concept is known as sensitivity. An increased amount of receptors on a cell makes a cell sensitive. A decreased amount of receptors makes a cell resistant. One example of this would be insulin resistance by type 2 diabetics. If their cells have less insulin receptors, then they will be less likely to be stimulated by the insulin that is present. This would make their cells insulin resistant. Until now, we've been talking about hormones, but not necessarily the endocrine system. You see, endocrine is one of three categories which separates hormones based on travel distance. Autocrine hormones stimulate the same cell that produced them. Paracrine hormones stimulate cells neighboring the producing cell. Endocrine hormones enter the bloodstream to travel to a target cell. The endocrine system is composed of the glands and organs which secrete hormones into the bloodstream. Side note, do not get this confused with exocrine glands. Exocrine glands secrete into a lumen or an outer surface, like saliva glands or sweat glands. The endocrine system regulates bodily function through cascades of hormones which are released into the bloodstream. This means that one hormone stimulates the release of another hormone, which could potentially stimulate the release of even another one before the desired effect is actually achieved. This process means that the signal to response time is relatively long when compared to the nervous system, which is close to instantaneous. To complement this, hormones have to degrade before they stop signaling. This leads to a relatively long active signaling time when compared to a neuron. When a neuron fires an impulse, the signal ends immediately. For more on the endocrine system, click the top video. For something YouTube recommends, click the bottom video. If you found this video helpful, or you're looking for more educational content, click subscribe below.